It's Wednesday and it's Sixmas Eve. What is going on?
It feels a bit weird, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Six Nations starts tomorrow.
It doesn't quite feel right. It doesn't quite feel real. Friday night games to kick off the tournament, we're sort of used to. They happen reasonably frequently now. Started in 2010, and people were outraged about that then. Will they just be used to Thursday night Six Nations games in a few years' time? Probably not, because there won't be Winter Olympics every year. But we are here. We are at the Six Nations launch. We are ready for the tournament to begin in Paris between Ireland and the team that play in Paris all the time. What is France?
The champions of the Six Nations,
Yes.
of course, France. So this is a hell of an opening game, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because we've done previews for all six of the nations that compete in this tournament, so you can go and look at those now. They're on the second channel.
Some aren't out yet.
Yeah, they're trickling out.
Italy will be out tomorrow.
Yeah. However, it's an interesting one because Ireland, they go into every tournament looking to win it.
Yeah.
And this French team are in a weird space where they almost feel like they probably will have to win this tournament, or at least go into the final day with a shot of winning it against England. So, yeah, this being in Paris, obviously, the atmosphere on a Thursday night is something that's very much untested, I think we can say at this point. But
they play Uruguay on a Thursday night in the World Cup.
Yeah.
And I think that's the only time France has played on a Thursday night, maybe. It's certainly at home. And tell you what, that game did not go according to plan.
No,
They really struggled in that game, and the atmosphere was a bit all over the place. That is not a precedent you can set. You can't look at that as analysis and go, oh, France's previous times on Thursday nights, they haven't been great. They've underperformed, but still won.
Other days with Ys in them, they've done all right.
Yeah. Now, this gives the team both extra days recovery after this, which will be useful going into the later rounds. But also, they'll be fine because none of their players played on the weekend for their relative teams. The LNR managed to release all the players that are in the 23. None of them were released back to their clubs, which, again, always a talking point in France, never a guarantee. But we do have two teams, both of them full of really interesting selections. Yeah. So we talked a little bit about Ireland have had a bit of an injury crisis. A lot of those are coming in the same positions, right? Which is why they've lost so many props. You've got Jeremy Lockman is starting, Michael Milne on the bench, the two Munster props are there. That has been kind of the big talking point from an Irish point of view. And yet there's a few selections that have just popped up. So Jamie Osborne has not played rugby since the Autumn Internationals.
Yeah.
Picked up an injury there, was ruled out. There was talk that he might be just about back in time for this game or the second round or something. And yet, when you haven't played a minute for Leinster, you don't expect to be thrown in the deep end. But Farrell's done it.
That's so Andy Farrell, isn't it?
It is.
That he's just gone, oh, well, you're fine. You're one of the first choice players, so you're straight in. Obviously, Hugo Keenan out injured, so he's gone. I wouldn't quite say like for like, but I suppose it's probably as close as he can. I suppose, weirdly, the other option would have been moving Jacob Stockdale to the back.
Which I think is what people expected, right? Was James Lowe to be on the wing for Stockdale at fullback.
Yeah, and that is kind of the controversial one, is that James Lowe is just not selected.
Yeah.
He's had limited rugby so far this season, but the last couple of weeks for Leinster, he played against Connaught the other week, and didn't do that much. Wasn't that noticeable in that game.
That's been the story of him since the Autumn Internationals.
Yeah.
And in the Autumn Internationals, he had some really great touches in amongst them, and his kicking game remains vital for how Ireland played. And yet, he was far from his finest collection of few games.
So,
and that's broadly been his form. So this very much feels like a rare form decision from Andy Farrell. Normally when you're one of his favourites, your form doesn't matter.
Yeah,
100%. You are in the team because he trusts you. Lowe hasn't justified his selection with form, right? So he's made the decision. Jacob Stockdale has been playing better than him over the last few months. It does feel a little bit of a throwback, doesn't it? A little bit of me every time I see Jacob Stockdale goes, God, remember him? But even though I see him play every week and see him play well for Ulster.
That's it. Ulster fans will all attest. He's looked really good this season, really solid. Defensively, he's great, and also he is a really good finisher still. Even though potentially he's kind of a victim of his own success. He set the bar so high in the 2018 Six Nations where he scored in every game, and since then people have assumed that he's not that good because he's not done that every Ireland game since.
He's been playing mostly fullback for Ulster, where he's looked great. He has slowed down a bit over the last few years. He's not the kind of rapid player that we all remember from 2018, as you mentioned, which was now the better part of 10 years ago.
Oh my God.
He has slowed down a bit, but he's also changed how he plays. So James Lowe dropping out is notable for a couple of reasons. One of them, they lose that kicking game. Now, Jacob Stockdale has always had a big peg on him.
Yeah.
He is what-footed?
Left-footed.
So he does fill that role
Yes.
alongside James Lowe.
As is Jamie Osborne, of course.
Yes.
Osborne,
So-
I would imagine, will be the person they will slot into
That's
that
it,
role.
yeah. So
who will go into the left footer whenever they're on that side of the pitch. And it's perfect. They don't have to shuffle anything around.
Yeah.
Usually what they do is in defence, when they're on the left-hand side in their own 22, they will drop James Lowe into the pocket as the clearing kicker, like the fly half, and they will either put their actual fly half or Dan Sheehan onto the wing to chase the kick. Because Dan Sheehan often just revolves as an extra winger.
he
in
is a
this
winger.
team.
Yeah, he works as a winger perfectly well. Half of that role, the kicking side of that role, will be filled by Osborne.
Yeah.
But will he end up also filling the other part of Lowe's important role for the entire system, which is playmaking? So often we see him come off the wing and be the guy stood in there throwing the simple little passes or organising bits of shape, which allows Prendergast, Crowley and past days that guy to sit off and wait for the bigger picture, or micromanage a wider pod, or look at shape and structure. And because their shape is so intricate, right, it helps to have 2 or 3 people running it. Mac Hansen also being injured doesn't help with this.
Yeah.
Tommy O'Brien's been playing very well for Leinster, and obviously for Ireland whenever he got the chance over the last year. So he's really deserved his selection, but he is not that same player. I've seen him fill in and do that job a handful of times.
He's much of a
but he's
proper
not
winger.
Mac Hansen, right? He's not like
Tommy O'Brien.
a former fly half, converted
Yeah.
fly half. He is an out-and-out winger, which has been a rarity for Ireland, really.
He's a strike runner.
Yeah.
You want to get him in those pockets, in those boots of forwards, so he can attack the line rather than so he can play the ball.
Yeah. It's the sort of player Ireland haven't really been selecting of late, where they have favoured ball-playing wingers rather than strike-runner wingers.
I'm really excited by Tommy O'Brien.
Yeah.
He's been one of the form players in the URC all season. And
Yeah.
last season as well, actually. Like, he is absolute jets when he gets the ball in space. And the other thing about this is, you mentioned Dan Sheehan there playing as a winger. They can kind of morph Jacob Stockdale and just tell him to be a rugby player.
Yeah.
Because he's got a really good rugby brain on him.
And
he's got a good kicking game. He can do all of these things. He can organise in the middle of the field. They can just shift Dan Sheehan out.
Yeah. We have seen Jacob Stockdale for Ulster pop up in the boot of pods a lot when he's been playing fullback, and we've seen him kind of start to play that role. I don't think he looks unnatural doing it.
No.
I don't think it's kind of the way he's best used and the way you get the best out of him, but he can fill that role if they need to.
an
The
extra
other side
threat,
of this
isn't it?
question, though, is like, are Ireland still going to play this way? Because we have seen more and more defences work out the way they attack, that kind of lots of little passes, and more teams just sit off them. You get a few steps up, kind of like Steve Tandy Scotland style, a few steps of really aggressive defence, you get up to their face and then you stand off and you just remain connected and you wait for them to kind of do their little dance routine, do the little passes, and then you just take whoever has the ball at the end of it, right? And more and more we are seeing teams just ease up on the line speed and teams go, okay, we could push them back 15 metres or we could push them back 2 metres, but we don't risk the line break that might come if they pick us off when we're trying to be really aggressive in defence.
Yeah.
And Sean Edwards will be alert to that. His French team have slowed their line speed a lot over the last year or two. Like, they are much less aggressive than they were. They're much kind of more of a containment team than they used to be. And I think a bit of that is necessity, right? It's because it's how you contain these attacks and how you keep on top of them. Because attacks were built around defenders being incredibly aggressive, and Ireland was the best at that. Ireland was the best at picking off a defence who wanted to smash you. Instead, you've just got to look to kind of contain them.
So I think you're bang on, that they are going to slightly change that.
Yeah.
And the reason why I think that is wearing the 10 jersey
Yeah.
is the fact that they've gone for Sam Prendergast instead of Jack Crowley. Jack Crowley is
Or
very...
Harry Byrne.
Yeah, indeed. Jack Crowley, an incredibly different player to this guy.
Yeah.
However, in terms of the way that Ireland would attack using him is a little bit closer in that he will just feed his pod nice and early. Whereas Prendergast, as we always say, he sits incredibly flat to the line and he will just in one pass get the ball to wherever it needs to be, rather than going for all of these long little intricate ones where the opposition can sit off and go, that looks nice. Anyway, I'm going to tackle you, you know? So in terms of France...
People sometimes confuse as well, just as a point, playing on the gain line as I'm going to run and attack with the ball an awful lot. Like, Prendergast doesn't do that. No. He literally stands if Johan Uge is the defender, he is here.
Yeah.
He stands in their face.
He doesn't
and that means
move.
you don't need to run.
Yeah.
Right? You are so flat that the defence has to fixate on you.
Yeah, you're a threat, because he only goes straight. It's not like he goes sideways at all. He literally doesn't move. The line comes to him rather than attacking the gain line, and it has the exact same impact.
Yeah, it's like when you're walking along and you suddenly notice a lamppost right in front of your face. And he is much like a lamppost in build as well as in as well as in play style. But it's like just having a thing in front of your face, right? You can't keep walking.
No.
You can't walk anywhere else.
No.
You've got to step around it, or you've got to like focus on that thing in front of you.
Especially because Gibson Park like whips the ball so quickly, and as does Prendergast, he can just pick out somebody in the defensive line and go, "You're who I'm opposite," you know. And the defence don't have time to just then shift off because the ball is already getting into Prendergast's hands at that point, and he can then do it. And because he's not actually running at them, like every forward wants to melt the 10.
Yeah.
And they always will. That's a part of rugby. And it's something that you have to kind of bite on.
Yeah.
So again, from that French perspective, in terms of defence, when you're, again, we discussed before, outside of your own 22 or your own area, so to speak, you can kind of sit off them a little bit. Because the French selection has really targeted jackal threats.
Yeah.
There are so many in that pack. You've got Charles Olivon in the second row alongside...
Michael Guillard.
Yeah, Michael Guillard. Again, two huge jackal threats. You've got Anthony Gélange, who's gone to 8 alongside Jégu and Francois Crowe.
Yeah.
You've got Julien Marchand. So there are jackal threats all the way through that pack.
Yeah.
And you would imagine they will slightly, as you say, like not bring as aggressive line speed, not risky with their line speed, so they can go after the breakdown. Until they get into their own area where I imagine they will gamble. They will go, Prendergast has to go for a pressurised pass.
Yeah.
He has to really fling it. Let's look for intercepts.
Yeah.
Let's look to get in his eye line. Let's be really aggressive. And if that means he has to throw the ball over our head, kind of so be it. You know, we will chase after that ball then.
So interesting you talk about Ireland's strategy changing over different areas of the field, which is always, obviously it's always the case with every team, right?
Yeah.
But I think there's something about how Ireland kick that's incredibly intriguing because they generally, right, and like this is a great example from the South Africa game, and that's a weird match because I think broadly, the impression you get from having watched it, especially watching it live once through, is Ireland were just melted, and they were essentially battered even if the scoreline didn't look that bad. And yet you actually watch the game back, right, and you actually look at it, and Ireland played a tactic that I think, like, if their scrum had parity with the Springboks and their pack had parity with the Springboks, could have, if not won them the game, it would have been very tight, it would have been very close, they would have been able to score, right? And yet because their scrum struggled so much, you've got 2 tries that came as a direct result of the scrum, and I'll include like Sasha's try is like very much that, because it's first phase off a scrum.
Front
like,
foot, innit?
Yeah, as the backs are retreating. You've got that, you've got like... You know,
And the
points
yellow
and penalties
cards,
and so
which
on
came
else.
as a consequence of the scrum.
Exactly, like further reduced there. If the scrum had parity, I think Ireland played broadly a tactical game that really took it to the Springboks. And I think we'll probably see a similar kicking game and kind of broad game strategy and model against France, who presents some of the same threats in terms of aggressive defence, in terms of big pack, right? And yes, France's scrum isn't South Africa's, but their pack is bigger, like physically bigger in terms of the men you're having to tackle and how you're trying to like prevent them getting game line ball, right? And so you look at the way Ireland kick in particular, and this is a great example because they do both of them back to back, right? And we see the kind of zone strategy in the space of like a minute and a half. So when they're looking to exit, Ireland now broadly, and they either go put it off the field, get it into touch, get it gone, so they can set their defence thoroughly. They have a line out. Ireland like to compete in the line out as well. And like their line out stats on their own ball were lower, but like they're still so good at disrupting opposition ball. If they're not sending it off the field though, broadly, instead of hitting it as long as they used to, Ireland are now kicking contestably. They're now, as an exit strategy, as Gibson Park does here, hanging it down those touch lines and hanging it in the air to allow a winger, in this case Tommy O'Brien, to get up and contest with the ball. And in this case, they win it back from the knock-on. And then from the scrum, immediately we see the other side, right? Once Ireland have got a little bit upfield, once they've got into the kind of 2 10-metre zones in the middle of the field, what they like to do is then kick slightly longer. And this is where then they will look to put pressure on South Africa. This kick is an inch or two too long from Gibson Park, but the idea is he wants to hang this so that Sasha is taking this and then getting absolutely melted by O'Brien on the chase. So then they can put pressure on and continue to force them backwards and force the Springboks to kick to them either loosely or just, you know, create an error in the 22. Like they want to keep momentum up there.
The other important thing about this is we talk about all the jackal threats that France have. Ireland have gone for a different approach. They've gone for loads of blast threats in that breakdown, which is perfect on that kind of kick chase. So you've got Caelan Doris, one of the best on the blast in the world in terms of just hitting that breakdown when it's static. Kian Prendergast coming in is superb at this sort of role. Josh van der Fleer, again, one of the best in the world at that. Joe McCarthy, brilliant at that. And then you've got Tyg Byrne, who's a proper jackler, like an old school jackler alongside all of that, which I think again, it tells you the way that they wanted to play in this kicking game, doesn't it? The way that they're wanting to apply pressure. And even if they don't win that ball back, they can then set line speed thereafter and play on their own terms. Because we've talked a lot before about the way that France like to kick. And the way that they like to kick is long.
Yeah.
And especially Jalabert. Jalabert playing at 10. He isn't too interested in a contestable kicking game. He likes a sort of kicking game that will allow him and his mates to run it back at you later on. And I think that's really interesting because that makes you more susceptible to charge downs, you know? You're more susceptible to slicing it and putting it into touch if you're trying to go for a little bit more length because you literally have to put more in it. You're closer to the touch lines, you know?
Yeah.
And so if Ireland are putting pressure on them, that means that France might have to revert to that contestable kicking game we've talked about. So if Jalabert does want to go for the sort of kicking game he favours, he may be susceptible to making a few errors.
Yeah, because I think this Irish kicking game is really intriguing. They are developing on from where they were a year ago. I think in reaction, we heard Ty Byrne talk about how much he doesn't like it. He doesn't like it being contestable. I think broadly Ireland's strategy, though, is get out your own half with the ball, right? Like, they will hang a 50-50 ball in the air in the hope that, well, worst case scenario, they're going to regather it anyway, right? So then they can potentially play out of there. They want the opposition to only ever have the ball in their own half, in their own possession of the territory. We will probably hear a few examples on commentary or around the kind of sphere or whatever of people saying Gibson Park putting kicks like this or Prendergast or whoever else is putting them too long. You know, putting them too long. That's not the case. I think Ireland are a lot of the time looking. They don't mind the opposition catching this because they want them taking it to so much pressure, then getting melted. They've also still got the old sliding one along the ground, you know, from Ringrose, from Stockdale be filling that role for Lowe, from Osborne most likely, where they want to bring the wingers up and kind of slide it in behind. France broadly play with 2 in the backfield, the fullback Ramos, and then the 10 in this case Jalabert, and then the wingers normally quite flat, you know, but can drop back if the situation allows for it or needs it, which is something I think Ireland probably look to exploit as well. Is just, can you try and create that space? Can you try and put through those kind of sliding, scuttering kicks that don't give Jalabert the time or Ramos the time to do anything other than kick it back? And Ramos is inexplicably brilliant at having no time at all and still making like 40 metres off those kicks. So it's, do Ireland stick to that is another area I think I'm interested in, or do they look to just be going off Gibson Park and Prendergast, or are they still looking at those wide balls?
I think the flip side as well is the French kicking game. We've talked a little bit about, well, a lot about how in the autumn they tried this contestable style, which didn't work for them too well, and the potential of whether they try and master that ahead of the World Cup, even if it means them having to screw up a little bit along the way. Now, the thing about this is, so the 2 primary campaigns where we've seen them lean into this were last year's Autumn Nations series and the 2024 Six Nations. Neither of those campaigns went well for them when they tried this. However, the other thing that those campaigns have in common is that they were doing this contestable kicking game without Antoine Dupont. So they had Nolan Garrick as the starting 9 in the last autumn. They had Maxime Lucu in that Six Nations we were on about. And arguably, it might just be...
Le Garrick for the second half of
the course, it might just be because these 2 have a better contestable kicking game than necessarily Dupont does, or it suits them more than necessarily Dupont does. But I'm quite interested to see, because are they doing this as a specific tactic to try and catch up with the rest of the rugby world for the World Cup, because you see less contestables in the top 14, like as a set thing that all teams do? Or is it a case of just, well, when we've not got Dupont, we'll try and play this game, even if it isn't really what gets the best out of our wingers? Obviously, they have put in Teo Atosogbe, who is so much better on the kick chase than Damian Penaud.
So much attention is going Damian Penaud not playing that no one's talking about Teo Atosogbe. And Atosogbe is so good at rugby. Right? Like, we were just having this conversation before we start recording, but like, I think he would start for basically any other nation. I think maybe Colby and Aronson would be above him for the Springboks, but like, they rotate in Moody and so on, and I think like he would be above Moody in that pecking order. I think he'd be above, like, I think he'd start for the All Blacks, I think he'd start for England, I think he'd be starting for basically anyone, except he's been unlucky with France. He's had Damien Penaud and Lou Biobra, who are both generational talents, as he is, ahead of him.
But he's a bit harder working than Penaud.
And him just being harder working and keeping at it has now led to him finally getting in that team above Penaud. And he really deserves this chance. He is a proper bullshit player who also has the hard work ethic, you know, and is brilliant under the high ball. So I'm so excited about what we can get to see him do. You know, last Six Nations, he scored a handful of tries, but most of them were just like Dupont or someone else putting him in for them. Will we get a chance to see him do the sort of thing he did in the summer last year against New Zealand and does every week for Poe? Like, every time I watch him, I'm more and more impressed with him and just how complete his game is and how he's able to create things that no one else can. He almost plays rugby a bit like he's, you know, sometimes when you see people that haven't like played rugby before and you don't know, you're not supposed to do that.
Yeah,
like, he's someone that has both an incredible understanding of the game and also that kind of like bullshit instinct where like most people don't do that, you know. It's like a handful of Fijians are the only people who can get away with that. So why are you trying that when you're not Fijian? Oh, no, he's just done it anyway. You know, he's just scored off it. I rate Asogbe incredibly highly. I'm so excited him finally get a chance in this starting 15. Like, and to have earned it, you know, to have got in on merit rather than it being necessarily that, you know, there's an injury there.
And once again, the dropping of Damien Penaud, as we discussed in the French preview, is indicative that they maybe are going to go for more of a contestable kicking game. And the thing that interests me about this is the options it opens up elsewhere. Because if you look back to, let's say, the England game 3 years ago now, where France tore them apart with the kicking game, interestingly, there's a handful of times in that first half where they're in the middle third, Dupont goes to roll the ball back, and England go, right, okay, they're going to go for a contestable. That's what every team does in this area. And they come up flat. Dupont then swaps onto his left foot, hits a 50-22. There's also this one here. Again, they flatten up and they go, right, who can get under this ball? And instead, Dupont puts a little chip kick in behind. You know, these opportunities will open up because even though Luku and Le Garrec, and whoever else, potentially Serin, might be better, more experienced as contestable kickers than Dupont, Dupont has a bigger range of kicks and also he does them off both feet. So it opens up quite a lot of opportunities. And I feel like France do need to lean into going for a contestable kicking game with Dupont to force those wingers from the opposition to sit up, to open that space further in behind. Because I don't think there is a scrum half I've ever seen who can slap the ball longer off a box kick than Dupont does. And if you're going to open up those opportunities for either 50-22s or for them to backpedal into their own half and have heaps of pressure on them, you want to bring those guys up. You want to force that pressure onto them to make them slip up. And if they don't do that, brilliant. Let's get Asogbe under the ball. Let's get BLBRA under the ball. Let's get, you know, Lenny Nushi under the ball when he comes onto the pitch.
And this, in a way that you alluded to earlier, leans into more of the French selection. So their second row is the thing that jumps off the team sheet to me.
Galtier doesn't respect that position.
So he doesn't. Galtier does not give a shit about the second row position.
He tried to make Cameron Woki a second row, which he clearly isn't.
Yeah, Woki has then played better rugby since moving back to the back row and kind of giving up on that dream. So Charles Ollivon has embraced the second row era. It comes for every back row eventually. You hit 30 and you start playing second row sometimes. That's just coming for you. But in picking Ollivon and Guillard, right, both of them can jump at lineouts and Ollivon's a very good lineout jumper for a number 7.
Yeah, and caller,
But you don't have your classic second row, like massive beanpole who runs the line out in that team. And Ireland have put Cian Prendergast in at 6, who, again, like, isn't that player, but is a very good line out forward for a back row forward. Ireland have a lot of line out options, where France have a lot of players who can jump at line outs. And I think there is a bit of a difference there. And I'm really intrigued by why they've done it. Because I look at that pack, and if you were to have like uncontested lineouts, right? Or you're throwing in like 1980s style, like just hopping it in. I think that maybe you could understand the logic of that pack, right?
Sure. He's got for mobility, hasn't he?
Yeah. Everyone in it provides different roles that can double up and has a secondary function, right? So like Guillard is your biggest carrier. He's in the second row rather than number 8. You've got Ollivon, like, is one of your main jackal threats, like high work rate, high like getting around the park and being on people's shoulders. You know, you look at the try he scored when he was playing second row in the autumn, and he is still playing that role even when he's in the row.
They're overcompensating for the lack of Thibaut Flamand, aren't they?
Yeah.
With Ollivon going into the second row and just going like, well, you're mobile.
But like, yeah, they're looking at one of their second rows to be the main carrier and one of them to be their main link man, though Jégu will also do that and be athletic as an edge forward. You've got Francois Crowe, you know, as they call him in France, the garbage man, because he does the job that no one else wants to do, and just clearing out rucks and hitting all of that and being nasty. And then it kind of allows Anthony Jelonch, and Jelonch is an interesting player, because he can sort of be any back rower. He's like a chameleon back rower, right? In that if you want him to be your main jackal threat, he will do that. If you want him to be your blast guy and just clean out rucks, he will do that. If you want him to be tackling all day long, he will do that. If you want him to carry, he's perfectly capable of doing that as well, right? Are they just going to go, we've got every other job on the pitch covered, Anthony, do whatever you like. You know, just like, get up to whatever you want.
Yeah, it's entirely possible. Especially you talk about the line-out. I want to talk about the scrum in a moment.
Yeah.
But first, you look at the French bench as well. They've gone for 6-2. Not only that, but they have gone with the old Rassi style, stick 2 second rows on the bench instead of 2 back rows on the bench. So they have gone with Ugo Oradu, and I still can't believe him and Oscar Jagu are getting picked in this team, but that's a whole different thing. And Emmanuel Mayafu. And last year against Ireland, they picked Manu Mayafu on the bench, and that was an inspired selection because he came on just as Ireland were tiring, and they sent him out. They sent him to carry every single ball that they could. They also used him as a distributor. So